Today, rock songwriter Bernie Taupin and Gothic novelist Anne Rice about their move to Broadway. Anne Rice is one of America's most popular novelists, and her books, which include The Vampire Chronicles, are bestsellers around the world. Bernie Taupin is known for writing the lyrics to numerous musical hits, especially the majority of those by his frequent musical partner, Elton John. Now, along with director Robert Jess Roth, composer Elton John, and book writer Linda Wolverton, Rice and Taupin are part of the creative team behind the new Broadway musical Lestat. Let's take a look.
And now it's time to rejoice. Join the faithful. Welcome to the new world and the music of the people. Welcome to the new world and bringing hope of the earth. Shake loose your pious shackles for some good old superstition. Welcome to the new world. All your would-be saints and sinners.
Keep those finer teeth. I don't need their chocolate, hot and sweet. It's thick and red for me. For everyone that comes along, knocking on their door. Don't blame me, it's your fault that I want more. Make me as you are. Tear the hands of clocks that tick away my final hours. We'll race against the light and leave the sun behind and feel the power of everlasting youth inside. Take me, give me new life, and we'll live beneath the stars. Sail me away, carry me back to my
Welcome, Anne Rice, Bernie Taupin.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, this musical is based on the character of Lestat, who we see through your Vampire Chronicles. Can you tell us what kind of a vampire he is?
Well, he's a good guy and a bad guy. That's the secret to Lestat. He is the villain, but he's also a hero because he didn't ask to be made a villain and because he wants to be good at whatever he does, and suddenly it turns out that he has to be good at being bad.
Given that he is a vampire, he doesn't die, so he's got a long life,
Right.
so it passes through many decades, centuries. How did they decide which parts to focus on in the musical of his life, because it is so long?
It looked to me when I saw the preview in San Francisco that they had focused on the second book in the series, The Vampire Lestat, which is really the big book, and they had used the structure of that book pretty much, but really Bernie probably knows more than I do why they did what they did.
What we actually did was we took, in the sense of the Chronicles, we took the first three books, which were Interview with the Vampire, Lestat, and The Queen of the Damned, and we really concentrated, actually, of those three on the first two, and of those two we kind of flip-flopped them so that we made them chronologically going in the correct order. So in a nutshell, I would say that the first half of the book bases itself more on the Lestat novel, and the second half is more on the Interview. But we've tried to sort of consolidate the character and melt it into one, as opposed to do the radical differences of the two books. Queen of the Damned, as wonderful as a book as it is, of course, is very dense in its historical content, and we felt that bringing too much of that into it might confuse those members of the audience that aren't 100% familiar with Anne's work.
Were you familiar with Anne's work before you started the project?
Absolutely,
You
absolutely.
Are a big fan.
Yeah, I mean, it was. I go back to the early 70s, and in fact, at one point, I believe, I can't remember if it was the late 70s or the early 80s, before Geffen made the movie of Interview, there was actually talk, and Anne and I actually had lunch one one day and talked about the idea of actually making a movie of it as a musical, but luckily that kind of fell apart, which is good, because I think now is the right time. Back then probably wasn't the right time.
Well, so you said that you were interested in you felt that there was something musical about these characters. So obviously did the director Robert Just Roth, who came with you with the idea of turning it into a musical. What was your reaction when he said, we can make songs with these characters?
Actually, I came into the process kind of late. I was told that Rob Roth had called and that they were interested and so forth. And I sort of took my time to respond because, you know, many things have come up over the years that really haven't come to fruition. And I didn't want to be disappointed again. And then suddenly I got this wonderful call that they have 5 songs ready. Do you want to hear the 5 songs? And I was kind of I was very, very happy. I was talking to my son about it, and he said, well, if you have any doubts about this being real, why don't you try to call Elton John himself and ask him if it's real? And so I called my lawyer and told her I would like to do that, and the next day Elton called, which threw the whole household into a tizzy. But he called, and he was absolutely wonderful, and he told me he'd written the entire score. He had not only the 5 songs, he had all of the songs. And I got to hear those songs 24 hours later on CD, and I just fell in love with the music. I fell in love with the adaptation they had created, everything. I thought it was great.
Am I understanding you right, that basically you created all these songs before final approval?
No, they had approval. I had gone ahead contractually, but I just didn't believe it was going to necessarily hold together, or that it was going to go into the next stages. I mean, I'd been through many developments over the years, things that just hadn't worked out, and I was afraid of being disappointed again.
And what made it interesting for you? Because this is the first time you've created something for Broadway. I mean, you've got, of course, a huge relationship with Elton John, but what made you say this?
Well, it goes back to your earlier question when you asked, you know, are these characters, what made us think that they could be used in a musical sense? And I think if you're familiar with Anne's work, there is something very theatrical and very almost operatic about the settings. And that was one of the first things that we wanted, in the way that we wanted to approach the music. I mean, musicals can be created in many different formats. Obviously, this is not sort of the light musical that Broadway is so often accustomed to. We wanted to make something that was a little more sensual, sleek and sexy, probably more in the realm of sort of Les Mis or Sweeney Todd, you know, a sort of blend of that kind of thing. And we also wanted it to have a sort of operatic tone, and I think when people see the show, they'll see that in the sets. You know, the sets are not dense, they're not heavy-handed, they're very sleek. They almost look like they belong sort of on the Metropolitan Opera. They're very sort of cut back and stripped. And I just think that the characters just lend themselves. To me, there is nothing sort of comical. I mean, obviously, people, it's easy to sort of be sarcastic and say, "Oh, singing vampires." You know, it has not had a good track record, obviously, on Broadway. At the same time, these characters, their foibles and their whole lifestyle, I mean, cries out for song and music.
Well, I think that is also the beauty of the characters that you created, the fact that they are vampires, but they are also human in a way. They keep the traits that they had before they were immortalized or turned into vampires, essentially.
Absolutely.
And I think one of the questions that everyone asks themselves when you leave the production is, would I trade?
Oh, yes.
Would I choose to become immortal? Of course, the negative is that I have to kill every night to survive, but then you could, I guess, make all of your friends immortal as well and your loved ones. So I want to ask you what you would do if you could be immortal. Would you make that trade?
Boy, it would be tough, but I would have to say right now, no, not at that price. And I think, in a way, the musical and the books, they're about that it's not worth it at that price.
Because they don't make the choice to become vampires.
Well, some of them make the choice and some of them don't, but it really isn't worth it. Life is where it's at, not immortality where you steal from those who are alive. That's not worth it. And that's kind of the theme of the Vampire Chronicles.
It's the core of the show, really. I mean, I think that people in the way that they come to think about the vampire mystique forget the most important rule and that is that you are forced to live forever, and that is a terrible, terrible prospect. And that is why these characters, ultimately some of them go mad. If you actually think of it in realistic terms, okay, I've got to live forever, you ultimately probably would lose your mind and find a way to end it. And that's what Lestat's great dilemma is. He wants to find a way not to have to end it and to live.
Bernie Taupin, Anne Rice, thank you for coming in today.
Thank you.
And the musical Lestat, from the mind of Anne Rice and with the music of Elton John and Bernie Taupin, is now playing on Broadway at the Palace Theatre.